So today I'll do a bit more of a formal intro for you. Today we have Zoe, Jett, Lee in. We started together in
2017.
Yeah, so 7 years ago now, which is quite crazy. And it's about, I think I moved to Sydney in February, so 7 years ago. And then you started the intake before me with Chris Mavros, yeah?
Yeah, Feb 11 was my official sort of start date at
Interesting.
FP, now 1P.
Yes, OP. You were one of the first people that I saw at fitness program. I went into the gym on a Sunday afternoon with my brother, and you were in there training.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. You probably don't remember that, but
no, I think that's one of the things that's always stuck out is our friendship from the very sort of beginning, the get-go. Like there are things that, wow, you're cracking open a cold one for the boys. It's not even Saturday.
I know, that was a bit louder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really cool is there are still so many things that I learned from you in the infancy of my coaching that I still apply to my clients today, and I still apply to my own training.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's really, really cool. I like that. I thought it was so cool because you were 17 when you started, yeah? You hadn't turned 18 yet, haven't you?
No, 17.
And I thought that was so cool that you were doing that from such a young age, because I would have liked the opportunity to have done it at that age, because I decided when I was about 16 that I wanted to be a PT, and then didn't get to be a PT until I finished school. But
all good.
Yeah, but anyway, here we are. I thought it was really, really cool. So I guess I've done somewhat of an intro, probably not done you justice.
We've done one. That's perfect.
Yeah. I do have to actually thank, what I've got to get into the habit of doing is thanking Benny and Aona for the sponsorship for the podcast studio. So going to start to spread the good word of that. So I guess tell everybody a little bit who you are and what you do.
So my name's Zoe, as you all already know now, and I am an online coach more so now, but I train mainly females to get them feeling their strongest and most agile, athletic, best self. I do put a huge emphasis on women's health, and in the realms of that, again, getting women feeling strong, confident in the gym, and making sure that they're nourishing their bodies with the appropriate sort of protocols from a lifestyle perspective, but then also largely from a nutrition perspective as well.
Cool. You've practiced that before, yeah?
I didn't.
You didn't? Well, it sounded really good.
Hey, when it's honest, it comes from the heart,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so tell us a little bit about what got you into PT, because you started from such a young age.
Yeah, so started from being a little bebe, and I think the biggest thing was I was really excited when I was working in a gym on reception.
Okay.
And I was really excited with the potential to become a personal trainer. And so I started studying while I was still in school. And so I'm pretty sure I skipped a few of my classes to go to the practical assessments.
It's worked out well.
Hey, and it was the last year of school. We still finished. But yeah, and then after working on reception at the particular gym that I was at for quite a few years, I came to FP, and the education was just second to none. But coming fresh out of school, I was like, I don't want to learn. I was like, I just want to work. I just want to make money.
Yeah.
And so I felt like for a long time in that sort of, I guess, first year where I was at FP and still sort of going through the motions of finishing school, being so young as well, my real passion was just seeing females feel strong and then having that ricochet into other areas of their lives. Because I feel like for myself personally as well, was once I got into strength training, and the Olympic lifting, all that sort of a thing. Where
you're going back to it at the moment, aren't you?
Well, yeah. I've returned to CrossFit.
To CrossFit. We won't talk about that.
A little bit different. We won't talk about that.
There is a weightlifting element.
Yeah, and I think, just the feeling of being strong and being able to show yourself in the gym what you're made of, and then being able to, outside of the gym, show yourself what you're made of as well. So I guess with getting into and building the business, it was largely just to sort of set a goal and work ruthlessly to achieve it and set a new goal and so on. Yeah. Now we're here.
Yeah, and so skipping all those classes some classes was worth it.
That's it. And it paid its dividends with the classes that we had to attend at FP.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, because I remember, I'm pretty sure they were mandatory for at least once a week as a level 1.
The Friday was, yeah.
Yeah. So you had to show up, and it's good because my subconscious still retained a lot of that. So it's still...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good spot to start and learn, and they've done a really good job to progressed the system so much from when we started. Like it was just kind of thrown in the deep end a little bit, but it was good. But what they do now is there's a really, really heavy emphasis on the business side of it, because most people get into the training because they like training. So like the systems were good then. That's why I started there, because I was like, I need to learn how to run a business. I kind of had one, but not to the extent that I do now. And so they make a big difference on that. And then the development made such a big difference as well too. But yeah, it was really, really cool. So when did you start training?
I would have been 12, I think,
Cool.
when I first joined a gym.
Yeah.
And I remember walking into the gym, and so I'd been this height, this stature, much younger face back then.
Yeah.
But no.
You still look pretty young.
Thank you. But being this height and this stature since I was about 11.
Okay.
So when I went into the gym, they asked for my mum's signature.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to train that day. So I just said I was 18 and signed the little thing. And then Bob's your uncle, I had a gym membership. So every time I went to the gym and then to school, I'd have to hide my uniform on the way out because I thought they'd really care.
Yeah.
Now, in hindsight,
No.
it's fine.
Yeah.
But
it's such a weird thing that I guess it kind of makes sense that there's such a like stigma around young people lifting weights.
Well, such a huge thing has got to be insurance.
Yeah.
And you've got to, like the narky parents who, if a kid was training at a gym and it's like, you should be supervising my child.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just went in and I was like, of course I'm whatever year I had to be born back then.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So how long have you been training for now? Over 10 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Really, really cool.
Thank you.
I started when I was about 11, but I wasn't allowed to go to the gym because you're not allowed to go to the gym until you're like 16 or whatever the magic number is, because something happens at that age.
Yeah.
But I can understand like the maturity and stuff like that. But I've had it with when I was at home. I used to train some junior athletes, rugby players and things like that. And people are like, is it okay if they, lift weights and things like that? I'm like, they're just smashing each other on the field playing rugby. This is more controlled than anything that they do out there, and you're worried about them lifting weights.
Well, and there's so much more literature now available that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there just wasn't that stack of literature that was enough for people to allow their children to train as freely as we can now.
Yeah, true. But that's really, really cool. So when it comes to like your training and your health and fitness, what are you most passionate about? Because I've seen you've grown a lot as a PT, and I can see from what you post on social media, like there's been quite a bit of a change in kind of your approach towards it. What are you, I guess you said it in the start a little bit, but what are you most passionate about now when it comes to health and fitness?
Well, I think I'll start with what I'm not passionate about anymore.
Okay, cool.
But
what are you not passionate about?
well, as a female training, but then also just as a young individual, we're so influenced by the things that we read, by the content that sort of surrounds us, and especially, I guess, social media is a blessing and a curse because you can get really beautiful educational content out there, and then you can also get stuff that's like blatantly wrong but just sells really well.
Yeah.
And so in terms of sort of what my passion used to be driven by, I used to be on this website, I wonder if it's still alive, called Tumblr, sort of like Pinterest. Do you? Yeah.
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah, it's like Pinterest for teenagers.
I didn't get the difference between. That's now a logo. I didn't get the difference between like Pinterest and Tumblr and like Instagram. It's just sharing photos, yeah.
Yeah, there's I guess Instagram seems much more interactive as individuals, whereas Pinterest and Tumblr was more sort of like mood boards.
Okay.
Sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And so what I would follow and what I would try and adhere to, along with the fitness magazines that I would buy, that sort of a thing, the goal was always to be skinny and to look like the Fitspo model, which in reality, like in hindsight, if I look back at that, I'm like, they don't actually look that healthy. Like they don't actually look like they have a substantial amount of muscle mass to ensure that they're not going to get osteoporosis as they age.
Yeah.
But that's what you're surrounded by. So what that sort of molded into after going through the rigmaroles of my own training and learning new things and then applying those things with myself and clients, all that sort of a thing. Now what I'm really passionate about is the complete opposite, where it's how you to look strong, you have to be strong. And to be strong, you have to adequately train, you have to adequately fuel, and you have to adequately recover. And as a female, there's a whole another side of that where then if you're not managing your stress levels, you're not managing things like a natural menstrual cycle, that sort of a thing, that can then throw a spanner in the works where the results that you build can be a lot more difficult to maintain, or the cost of maintaining them is much greater.
Yeah.
And so now my passion lies a lot more in a holistic approach to being just the strongest and most badass version of yourself. But yeah, does that answer your question? That does.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the things you focus on with your clients to achieve that?
So one of the big things that I focus on is their menstrual cycles. And with that, something that I notice a lot is although we have so many similarities between sort of cycles, and there's obviously very sort of particular phases where someone will feel X, Y, Z, but everyone is also their own individual being. So that's a huge thing is with a woman's cycle, someone might feel great and still be able to push their training quite intensely the week before they bleed. Other women may need to take a complete sort of back step. We reduce their training volume. We might decrease their carbohydrates, increase their fats, and they feel amazing. They recover well. Other women just might need to chuck in an extra rest day, that sort of a thing. You might need more water in a particular area of your phase, but we only know this by studying it week in, week out. So that's a huge thing that I focus on. It's probably the biggest thing that I focus on with my women who do have natural cycles. Because then from there, it's like we can then leverage that to know how to push and get as strong as possible. Push for the weeks where our body is more limber and where we've got more strength. Push to find greater technique, greater strength, and then we solidify that. And if there are weeks where they need to pull back particular levers, we can pull them back strategically so that they're not just sort of chasing their tail month in, month out, which is a very common thing with females, and sort of like binging and restricting with food based on sort of parts of their cycle, where it's like, why is it so easy for me to diet after I bleed versus the week before my period, I can't control myself. I just ordered 5 blocks of chocolate and some pad thai off Uber Eats. Yeah,
for sure. That's actually one of the things we spoke about last week with Denny, but not in as much as in depth, because just for whatever reason, it's not something that she focused on, because hers is more the calisthenics and stuff like that. But for her, she said she will just, a big focus for her is just turning up at the gym regardless. And if it's a day that she's going to push, she'll push, but she won't try and let it dictate too much, from what she was saying, whether if she turns up on a day that she technically shouldn't push, but she feels okay, she might push. It was a question that one of my clients actually asked, because I've worked with some girls before around, I'm not an expert in it in any way, shape or form, but I do know that it affects it.
A humble man, always.
Yeah. But I think when we were training, we started to, because I was doing your programming for a little bit, I think we were regulating your training a little bit around it, but not to the extent that you would do now and that you know now. But I can't remember what I was saying, long story short.
Asking a question, your client asked a question.
Oh yeah, so I guess if you had some practical advice on it, my client asked a question about what you would training around your cycle. So what are a couple of the things that you do with your clients? Obviously it's a general and broad question, but you probably answered it a little bit there before, but what's some general advice for people to train around it?
So I think we have to pull the big levers first.
Okay.
And that's where understanding that as individuals, some people won't experience symptoms in their luteal phase, which is the sort of 7 to 10 days before your bleed. Some people won't experience too many different symptoms there. Some people will experience a lot. And the biggest thing is, if you are tracking your cycle, that's a fantastic place to start.
Cool.
And if you're not, then tracking your cycle is a big yes.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of starting to, again, track, and like the more data that we have, the better, because then we can start to actually see and move, again, the appropriate levers that are going to take 20% of the work but give 80% of the results, instead of moving all these little levers who are getting sort of tiny prongs of benefits over the course of a few months. But yeah, so tracking your cycle, number one. And then number two is tracking your symptoms to particular sort of things. So particular sort of events that might occur, particular foods, that sort of a thing. Because when it comes to gluten and dairy, and I'm not about to go down that rabbit hole today, But a lot of
Rabbit holes are welcome. Tangents are welcome. So if you want to.
hey, it's too much. It's too much. No, but so some people are maybe able to tolerate, say, gluten and dairy quite well throughout the course of their cycle. They won't notice any sort of increases in pain, inflammation, cramps, that sort of a thing. They might not have many luteal symptoms to begin with. Whereas on the flip side, someone who consumes gluten and dairy a lot may notice that when they pull back on that and when they pull back on it for a specific amount of time, they start to notice their symptoms improve. They might not have as many cramps, they might not have as much pain, fatigue, and then they also, coming to their bleed, they might not even bleed as much or for as many days. And so this, again, bring it back to that first point where you need to be able to track your cycle and then track your symptoms, but not only your symptoms to your cycle, your symptoms to particular events. If you push a really hard training session and it's also in your luteal phase and then you feel like absolute shit for the next 2 days, you probably know that going balls to wall isn't going to be that conducive with long-term progress. Yeah, it might feel good at the time to stroke your ego and be like, look at me showing up and doing max effort. But if it comes at the cost that you have to pay for it over the next few days, it's like, okay, where can we sort of adjust and fiddle with this? So I have one client who she primarily trains CrossFit. And she primarily trains CrossFit, and during her luteal phase, we actually pull back on her conditioning. She feels pretty like, because there's a strength component in a class and then a conditioning component, and she may do extra conditioning work as well. And so on the week of her luteal phase, we'll actually pull back on her conditioning. She continues her strength work, and with that little bit of sort of reduced stress physically, she feels much better in terms of sort of when her cycle comes, symptoms when her cycle's like leading up to it, but then also post when she starts bleeding as well. Her symptoms are much more manageable with that in tandem with nutrition as well. So so tracking as much data as possible would be the big umbrella term. But cycle tracking and then symptom tracking, not only around each phase, but then also for particular events or foods.
Okay. So when you're looking at, you touch on the gluten and dairy, and you don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much with it, but do you, if it was someone that, do you just pull those foods out for a period of time, like say a week or two during that part of the cycle, or do you have them do like an elimination diet where they don't have it for months on end, or what are some common things you would do working around that?
So with gluten and dairy, I do find that for a lot of people, the quality dictates how their body responds to it and how triggered their body might be in reaction to it. And this is where sort of tracking how you might feel after eating a particular meal can tell you a lot. Some people can feel absolutely fine with goat and sheep's dairy, but really bad with cow's dairy. And that's because cow's dairy is higher in A1 protein, I believe, whereas goat is higher in A2 in comparison to A1. And A1 is casein protein, basically, which can be a bit harder for our bodies to break down, a little bit higher in lactose. But so in terms of navigating gluten and dairy with client and having someone completely remove it, I do something with my new coach, Soph, on the team as well. We do something called a success menu, where we'll actually sit like this over a Zoom call for about an hour for their first one, then usually for adjustments only sort of 30 minutes. But we actually sit and brainstorm a plan together that a client is willing to adhere to and will enjoy adhering to. And so we call it a success menu. And so when it comes to removing the gluten and dairy, it also comes down to educating the client, but then also brainstorming with them. If they're like, I like full cream milk in my coffee, I don't want to change it. Then it's like, okay, well, let's see what other levers can we pull? What other things can we adjust so that majority of your plan is absolutely awesome? And then if you're still feeling like shit and we need to try that full elimination, let's do it. But I think that fully eliminating particular foods from your diet, you can feel absolutely incredible. Okay, that's one important thing to note. But it does mean that the less of that bacteria that's in your tummy, the more sensitive you can be to these triggers when you have one of those foods out. So it's if you can really commit to completely eliminating things, great. But then it's really not realistic for a lot of us, especially because as our society and where we are in Sydney, Australia, we have a hyper available, hyper palatable sort of food industry. So it's like it's very accessible. A lot of it can be very processed and engineered to taste really good, so we want to eat more of it. And it's like, this is all okay. And if we want to squeeze particular things in where you do have a few, if it fits your macros meals, then we just see how you feel. So that's a huge thing. I hate to completely remove things and tell a client if you have X, Y, Z, things aren't going to go down well.
Yeah.
But it's that little education and brainstorming and assessing what feels good and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that for myself personally, if I have sourdough bread,
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10, tummy is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But I tend to know my GI symptom is usually going to be bloating if I've
Mm-hmm.
had something a bit funny.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so something like sourdough bread instead of your regular white bread or wholemeal, that sort of a thing. I believe it's because it's got it's not as high in gliadin, which is part of, it's like a protein molecule of gluten.
And
I don't want to butcher it.
it's something to do with the fermentation process, isn't it? That it takes, it's almost pre-digested in the fermentation process.
Yeah,
I think that's how like the sauerkrauts and things like that work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they can be higher in probiotics, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
But it still has gluten in it.
Yes,
So that's where a lot of people are, I can't remove all gluten. And it's like, you definitely don't have to.
Yeah.
But if we can maneuver and we can see what fits well, what sits okay,
Yeah.
then we can work with that and we can move forward with that.
Yes. And if you're celiac, don't have probably.
Yeah, if you're celiac, maybe don't play around with that.
No. But like you said, that if we can move forward with that and work around it, and there's always going to be a cost with some change at some point, and if you're having, is the cost of the adverse reaction worth it? If it is, cool. But if you don't want to have that adverse reaction, then maybe get rid of it. It's an interesting point you touch on with, I guess there's people are so unaware of digestion and how foods affect the body, because I guess it makes sense that people don't have the education and knowledge around it because it's not their job. But obviously as PTs and coaches, that's one of the things that we try to do, is educate people on it. But I had a client recently, he has not had carbs for a long period of time, and he was almost adamant that he couldn't have carbs. But oftentimes when he would have carbs, he would have them in a very high amount, and then he would go without, and then high amount, low amount, high amount, and low amount. But he also does have some digestive issues and things like that. And I was trying to build his diet so he can get to the point where he can do, similar to what you're saying, be able to perform and be as strong as you look, and then be able to pull him into a deficit so he can get that body composition result that he wanted. And so going through that process of, like, we've got his protein to where it needs to be and his fats where it needs to be, but he wants to do a lot of exercise and combat sports and things like that. And it's like, it's all dependent on carbohydrates for the most part. It's higher intensity exercise. You need carbohydrates in there. So we played around with adding some different carb sources in, but he knows that gluten and dairy, or gluten in particular, gives him some pretty bad reactions from skin and also digestive function. And I was like, well, let's look at some like no gluten-free options, so rice, and then ideally lower gluten options, so oats and things like that. And he added them back in, and after a couple of days, he had some somewhat adverse reactions to adding them back in. But I said, just if you can persist with it for a week, if it's no good after a week, let's pull it out. But if you haven't eaten carbohydrates for a long period of time, you wouldn't have the enzymes in your gut to be able to digest those, and then you'll have that adverse reaction. And so I guess to your point, it is one of those things that we have all those foods around us, and it's good to eat them if you abstain from them for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden you add them back into a higher quantity, you're going to get bad digestion. And then it could be fine to eat it a little bit more frequently, but not in as high quantity. But doesn't always necessarily have to be it's either up here and then, or it's nothing at all. And like to your point as well too, the more you start to track, the more you can start to see the trends of that's that, this is that, this gives me this reaction, and then you can manage it a lot better and have more knowledge around the whole thing, as opposed to all or nothing, because at some point we're a little bit ignorant. Some people not ignorant, but I guess people just don't know. And the more we know, the better we're usually able to function.
100%. And I think a huge thing, touching on the all or nothing sort of approach, is that it's the big lot of carbs and then it's none at all, or it's the big lot of alcohol and nothing at all.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of clients can feel so empowered when they come to a check-in having fucked up their protocol or fucked up sort of our plan that we had lined up. And I can just tell them, like, you know, it's okay. You're going to be living for another very long time. And even if you weren't, like, it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. What matters is that consistency, what you do most, and then also appreciating sort of your long-term goal and your long-term health from a mindset perspective too. Like when we're trying to, and that's like in terms of fat loss phases, some people will say you should build all year and then do just one like really good fat loss phase. And that could be great for a lot of people and it can be disastrous for others.
Yeah, and you're also going to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, like
to get to that point, to be able to do that, it's really, really simple. Just build all year and then do one cut.
Yeah, on paper.
Yeah, but like getting someone from if you've had, like I've had experiences from being up and down, up and down, up and down. Like at my lowest body weight at 20 years old, I was 65 kilos.
Yeah, wow.
And now I'm 83 or something like that.
Well done.
Yeah, but like to be able to get to the point where I'm at now, to be able to do it for a few weeks and then come out of it or whatever it might be, it takes a long time. And it's not just the on paper, do it for a year, then cut this amount of weeks. Like it's such a big process to be able to make those changes. And I guess that's why it's important, if you're trying to make those changes, that you probably should have a coach that knows what they're doing and pays attention to all the information. Because sometimes it is somewhat invasive getting all the information, but it allows you to, there's going to be a cost some way.
Yeah.
It allows you to get that result that you want or closer to it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off there with the ups and downs and what you were going to say.
I have no idea now. Yeah, I think though it's definitely in terms of getting information from clients. That's something where, and it's not to say so sorry to everyone listening, I definitely believe you, but your first consultation call that you might have with a client, and it lasts between 45 to 90 minutes, and you get out a shit ton of information.
Yeah.
But the next 2 weeks are so much more telling.
Yes.
And so that's something with my clients when they first sign on. And I learnt this from Micah and Ewan, who were also OG coaches at Fitness Playground.
Yeah. The OG FP crew.
That's it, the OG FP crew.
Kind of miss those days a little bit.
Hey, there were easier times. You know, you always, in hindsight, it's like, that was so much easier back then. So much more simple.
Yeah. It was good
Everything
fun.
comes with a cost.
Yeah.
And life is still beautiful now.
True.
But
that's one thing. I went to sorry, before I cut you off.
I
went to a wedding a few months back, and I think there was a quote from like The Office or something like that, and it was like,
of course.
Yeah. But it was actually really, really good. It was like, wish you knew that you're in, you know, you always remember the good old days, and I wish you knew that you're in the good old days
right now
at the time. And it's like, well, if you're doing the thing you are, then it is. You'll just always look back on it different to what it is at the time. But this is reminiscing on somewhat of the good old days.
Exactly.
And making more good old days.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
So what I learned from Micah and Ewan,
Yep.
This is my lion's mane mushroom talking.
Okay.
That's picking up the conversation.
Okay.
Like, I remember.
Cool.
We do something that's a little bit like a health optimization phase, is what Micah and Ewan would call it when I did a little bit of mentoring with them. And with that, I sometimes extend this phase out for 2 to 4 weeks, and we just sort of call it, it's basically a maintenance block, but it's finding a client's accurate maintenance.
Yeah.
So calories, whether that be if they want to track, or we create a success menu where they get their menu, so everything's in portions for each meal, and then they also get their corresponding grocery list for how many days of that food plan, because I like to do 2 plans in the week. So you have Monday to Wednesday and Thursday to Saturday. And then you have 1 day of the week that's a bit of a free tracking day. So you can either choose to do a bit of an if it fits your macros situation, or you can just take the day off tracking and be mindful with your consumption of what you're eating.
Yeah.
Because the goal is that as you get more educated anyways, you don't see as much value in particular foods that you may have been like, oh, it's a cheat day.
Yeah.
Because as you become an adult, you should really wean off the cheat days.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with that and sort of getting information from a client, I find a lot of clients will give you the surface diagnosis that they've been given from someone else, if they've been seeing another professional, whether it be like a psych and it's sort of, oh, I've got a little bit of sort of anxiety around food, but I'm working on it with my therapist, or whether it be I used to have an eating disorder, XYZ. And what can sometimes happen in this phase of 2 to 4 weeks, you get a few check-ins done. And in those check-ins, you see it's like, oh, they're actually still quite anxious about what foods they're eating, quite anxious about their consumption, quite sort of self-deprecating when they mess something up. And it's like, okay, we need to be able to nurture this individual, this human, and empower them so that they know that like these little quote-unquote slip-ups is just part and parcel of being human. And it's, if you loathe those little slip-ups, you just make more of them, basically, because you're not actually moving through the issue. You're not actually processing the sort of the issue.
Yeah.
So I find it's really beneficial those next few weeks with a client, especially, to really be like, is it time to actually diet after this 4-week period, or do we need a good 3 to 6 months of at least maintenance at the bare minimum, because you have not done more than a month of maintenance in the last decade?
Yeah, and it's really hard to diet when you can't make cuts from the calories that you don't have.
Yeah.
Like if you're cutting from the lowest point already, you're probably not going to be able to cut anymore.
Yeah.
Which is quite a common thing for people under eating, and I guess you might see it a little bit more, although I see it quite a bit with guys as well. I've had clients complain to me recently of how much I've been trying to push their calories up a little bit. I'm like, I can't eat this much. I'm like, don't complain about, you're not gaining weight and your performance is going up, your energy is going up, and it's going to allow you to get to that point. Those periods of maintenance, I think sometimes definitely overlooked, because it's either the up or down, it's all or nothing. But the periods of maintenance actually allow you to make the change that you want to see, which is often it's such an overlooked thing, I guess. But how long what's a typical time that you work with a client for? What's your sort of minimum commitment? You have quite a long period of time now, yeah?
So I actually have quite a small commitment.
Right, okay.
It's just 6 weeks.
Okay, yeah.
But it's mainly because in terms of sort of gelling with a client, again, I like to get that I like to establish that on the first call.
Yeah.
But sometimes after 6 weeks, a client has much bigger fish to fry that I can't help with and don't think I should help with until they get it rectified.
Yeah.
So, for example, I had a woman sign on who we've actually been talking for the better part of a year on Instagram, back and forth. We both love sort of talking about gut health, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And she signed on, and we realized very quickly that there's still a few more things to do with her gut, but then also a few more things to do that she wanted to rectify using a few more sort of, I guess, like mindset, mentoring, energetic methods, which I definitely will give a lot of sort of mentoring and mindset and tips and tools and that sort of a thing. But largely, we tackle sort of things from a holistic approach. So if you want to get into something a lot deeper, so something like the things that you would journal about that you would only tell your therapist about, that's where I'm like, okay, I can listen, like I'm more than happy to listen, but I'm not going to give advice on this or coaching on this, because it's out of my scope. Like I can tell you what I think is best, but I have not been through the lives you've been through. Like I've not been through the experiences you've been through. And in terms of coaching someone through, like, again, more serious issues, I would rather be the lending ear than sort of be like, okay, here's the journal prompt I think you should do. Yeah, I'd prefer to get like a few more certifications and a few more years under my belt before I can really put my foot down and be like, if you want that degree and that depth of really cracking, like soul cracking sort of healing experience, I can refer you to people. Because I definitely, like, we do a lot of healing, and a lot of my clients will be like, you're just like that for me. But it's
different.
Yeah, and it's so case by case dependent. So it's actually only 6 weeks. But in saying that, majority of my clients, once they sign up with me, majority of them stay for like 18 months or more. Like they're all very long term, which I love.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And because the change that people want to see as well too, it doesn't take 6, 8, 12 weeks. It takes a year or two. And I guess it's hard for people to see that
100%
as well.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people will hire a coach for a body composition result. And be like, but I also like you because you've got a no BS attitude. And then you apply that no BS attitude, and it's like, you said you wanted this, and it's like, oh, there's so much going on, it's too hard, that sort of a thing. It's like, okay, that's okay. It's like, if we need to take a back step, if we need to pivot, it's like, we can do that. But sometimes, like, there's a level of responsibility that I feel like, especially, and this can be quite common in women, where you give so much of yourself to other people, like the people pleasing sort of archetype, that you, in terms of putting yourself first, it's such a circuit rewiring that needs to happen. Yeah. So I find that's sort of a huge thing as well with people who come in for sort of a body composition result, and it's like, okay, we have to do a few of these things first. And that's where, for my clients who do stay on board, who we don't really need to refer out, they're willing to sort of work through these things together. We tend to stay at maintenance for a lot longer. And it's like, okay, I know we want to diet after 4 weeks of finding your maintenance calories and getting your habits in place. And it's like, but your body and your stress levels are not going to be able to adequately cope with metabolic stress. You're going to end up repeating the same cycle you've been repeating for the last decade. It's like, if you trust me for us to stay at maintenance, then we can start to rectify these behaviors. If you prioritize your training, you prioritize training really hard, then you will see fantastic results eating just at maintenance. And then when your weight starts to drop down at maintenance, it's like, cool, recomp. Let's give you a little caloric increase. And for some people, they don't want to stay for that. They're like, nah, I want to be with someone who's going to put me in a diet. And it's
then they'll repeat the cycle and come back and see you in
and that has happened a handful of times where people, they're like, oh, I saw someone else, and it's like, I know I'm back. And it's so hard in the moment. And I find this as well for myself, for my business goals. It's so hard in the moment when you are comfortable enough to focus on that delayed gratification. And that's something a lot of people who they feel ready to invest in coaching, which isn't sort of, it is an investment sort of a thing. Like, you're not sort of dropping like $30 a week, jump on board with another 100 people. So it's like, it is an investment, and usually those willing to invest, you've got to be able to sort of be reminded of that delayed gratification, because otherwise it's so easy to get caught up in that sort of that now, the next month. It's like, well, I've got a party coming up at the end of this month. What do you mean I can't diet? And it's like, I just got to let you know that over the course of the 3 weeks between now and that party, you might lose a kilogram if you're lucky, and you're probably not going to look that different. Like, so much of it is psychological as well. And it's like, if you're having that sort of a thing where you need to be smaller for an event, it's like, we need to work on you loving yourself at every stage, because you can't build anything, Martin Luther King, you can't build anything out of hate. Like, you can't breathe light out of darkness. Like, you have to be able to love and respect yourself to actually hold yourself accountable to those higher standards to get to that next level.
I was talking to Matt Duncan about that recently, he was talking about it in self-determination theory and the different levels of motivation. And to your point of, you can't build something out of hate, you're only going to get so far. Once you get a certain proximity away from that position that you don't want to be, it's going to stall out, because there's nothing else on the other side of it. And then that's probably where the people start to get the yo-yo up and down, because once they get that proximity away, it's almost gone. So then people can revert back to their old habits, their old self, and then this yo-yo up and down. Whereas if you're progressing to, more performance or whatever it might be, and building yourself and, accepting yourself for who you are and all those sorts of things, then it's a lot easier to push way beyond that point that you kind of always get to. Otherwise, then, if you're not happy with your body, and that's the thing that you're running away from, it's probably not going to be, you're not going to enjoy the process as well. And I think one thing that most people that are successful in health and fitness, they probably, not always, but they enjoy the process more than they don't enjoy the process. Like, if it was in your business, you didn't like doing it, you wouldn't be successful.
Exactly.
It's no different. There was something you said in there that I was going to ask. So, well, tell me so when you're doing the 2 to 4 weeks at the start, or then you move someone from that into they need to do it for a couple of months or a longer period of time, what are some of the things that you would do around your programming to keep that client engaged in that process while they're at quote unquote maintenance, or at their maintenance?
So it really depends, again, on the client. And so this is something that, in terms of the way that I structure my business, I don't take on too many people, because I want to be able to give everyone that individualized attention. So with that, some clients, it might be like, okay, if we're staying at maintenance for a little bit longer, would you like another training day? We can split your training volume across 4 days instead of 3. And it's focusing on sort of doing other things for fun, that sort of a thing. Because I think the biggest thing is keeping a client engaged who is desperate to diet but really not in a place to diet. It's you got yourself into that hole for a reason that we don't want to revisit that. And so usually in this period of time where it might be we begin a diet after 4 weeks and now we're going to check in at the 3-month mark and see if we're good to start a diet. That usually is enough motivation, setting that deadline, that sort of time frame, where it's like, okay, I'm going to really prioritize my healthy habits so I can get my body feeling and performing at its best, so that then when I go into this deficit, I can actually have that more firm and defined look that I'm after. Because people, they look at a strong girl in a bikini and they go, oh, I've got to diet. And the strong girl in the bikini has not dieted for years.
And dieting sucks.
Well, and it's not where your dream physique is sort of built.
No.
And it's the duration of, for a female to put on a kilogram of muscle, naturally, granted all systems go, everything's good, a kilogram of muscle will take about a month to put on. Yeah, a month. That's if everything's going well. And so it's like you put on the fact that you're metabolically not in a position to put on muscle. Like your maintenance calories are at 1600 and you're high stress in your job. You hate your job, you hate your relationship, but you don't want to leave because it's like it's too comfortable, it's too scary. Like what's going to happen? And there's so many of these other things. You don't sleep because you're watching Netflix all night. And it's like, you are not in a position to diet. And if you do, it's just repeating that same cycle. But it's, I feel like it gives women the sort of 3 months then to reassess. It's like it gives us that opportunity to focus on other things because I'm not budging. So, and I think that's another thing, like, thanks to my stubbornness, it's like, I get you might want to diet sooner than this. It's like, cool, when your 6 weeks is up, you can go to a coach who might be a little bit cheaper, who might put you on a diet, and you can come back and see me in a year. Like, because it's the physique that so many women desire to achieve is an athletic physique that requires food to be built and requires patience. And so I think once a woman knows that sort of you're going to be able to pop on about a kilogram of muscle in a surplus. So if you're eating at maintenance, it's even less than that per month, right? So it's like once you gather that it's a much longer process to actually build, and it's like, well, I want to diet because I feel like I've got too much body fat on me, rah. It's like, cool, well, over these next 3 months, you put on hypothetically a kilogram or 2 max of muscle. Over this time frame, we rectify a lot of your habits, so you're in such a great state to diet. And then when you diet, the first thing you see is like a little shoulder vein pop out, or you actually start to see the definition in your abs that you've been visualizing and that you said to me initially on that first call. Because that's one thing in the first call as well with clients. I'll ask them, I'm like, where do you want to be 12 months from now? Like, who is that version of you? How do they show up? And I stopped asking, like, what do they look like as the first sort of point of reference? But it's like, who are they? How do they feel? How do they act? And it takes the goal away from, like, I must look like this to, like, I want to become this. I want to be this. And then it's actioning.
That feel one is a big one because it can kind of anchor people to that because there's carryover from, you know, if there is a obviously if we get in a better aesthetic shape, that can have a positive carryover to how someone will feel, but it's not the only thing. And when you're just chasing that, then it's also, when you get there, you probably don't feel that good if you're just focused on, we've probably all dieted hard enough, and then you get there, you feel you're lean, and then you don't have energy, and you feel like shit, and then you come out of it pretty quickly.
So often as well at the end of a diet, you've got so much body dysmorphia that you're like, I don't look any different. And you got to pull out those comparison photos. Like I remember on my, when I competed last year, on the day, I was like, who do I think I am to even be someone to step out on this stage with these other girls? I was like, I am way too, like, total, very distorted perception of myself. But I was looking in the mirror and I was like with the other girls in backstage and I was like, I can't go out on stage. I'm like, I look like this. And now I look back at like videos from that day, that sort of thing. And I'm like, you look like a hot, fit Victoria's Secret model. And it's like back then, all I could do was I didn't want to post anything because I looked at it and I was like, you look horrible. Like because you see all your BTS in the diet phase.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who's struggling with particular, like you miss a cardio session here or there, or you overconsume food here or there, it's like you're seeing all of those BTS sort of moments.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't look as good as I do. Whereas it's when you can sort of go through a dieting phase and actually, in my opinion, I prefer shorter ones where possible. Like it depends how much weight someone has to lose and what their commitment is, what it means to them, that sort of a thing. But it's like during a really long haul one, you get fatigued.
Yeah.
And it's like, at what cost, if you want to be in good shape for the rest of your life, does it all have to be done in the next 6 months?
Yeah, that's the big thing. And how holding, I really like the, what do you want to look in, oh sorry, not what do you want to look like, what do you want to feel like in 12 months? Who's that person you want to be? How long was your prep for your comp?
22 weeks.
Oh my god.
The first 12-week block was 2 weeks on, 1 week at maintenance.
Yeah.
But I had very quickly, so I just had my boobs done.
Yeah.
And so I didn't train for the first 3 months of prep anyways.
Did you plan that, or?
Oh, I in hindsight got a bit of FOMO because I had my client who I'd prepped the year before, and one of my current clients who she was doing that show. So they were both doing that show, and I was like, damn, I've got FOMO, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I thought because of the years of training, I was like, I've got heaps of muscle, it's absolutely fine. And of course, post huge surgery, because I'd never had one, my body was like, what's going on with this trauma? First time under anesthetic, everything.
It's a weird experience, hey?
Oh, wow. But best sleep ever, also.
I spoke about it last week. I had an experience as anesthetic that I didn't realise I was going to be fully under.
Mm-hmm.
And so I woke up a couple of hours later.
Yeah. What happened?
Fuck just happened?
Yeah.
I had a thing removed from my hand, so I was like, I'll be awake for this.
Yeah.
And then a few hours later, I was in the recovery room, just not knowing what happened.
Oh my God, yeah. I woke up, so I was talking to the doctor who was putting the thing in, and we're just obviously having conversation, and then it's like,
Yeah.
But
gone.
Well, that's
Incredible.
That's when I woke up. I was like, something went wrong in the surgery, and they've woken me up. And that felt like it was 20 minutes, and I was like, but I feel so rejuvenated.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my God.
I didn't get that surprise.
But it was, I was like, damn. I was like, can you get this prescription? A little bit of anesthetic every couple months, just bring the sleep back up.
I think people use it on the weekend for something different.
Hey, I think it's definitely something you don't actually want to toy around with. Let me be clear with that. Yeah.
No. So what we're talking about, your 22-week prep. So you did 2 weeks on.
1 week off for the first 12.
Yeah.
And then it was sort of just popping in refeed days here or there throughout. In hindsight, I really should have picked a coach sooner who wasn't biased to how I felt. And so my partner, I asked him to coach me quite early on, and I think sort of thought it was a joke. I don't know. But then it was finally 13 weeks out, we started check-ins. Yeah. And I didn't realize how much I needed them and how much over that initial block to set me up before calories were deadly low. Yeah. Because I was just doing my own prep for the first sort of few weeks. And with that, every time I would mess up, I would, what's the word? Reprimand myself. It's not the word I'm looking for. But every time I would mess up, I would increase my daily step target 2,000. Yeah. Or I would decrease my calories an extra 100. I would just start, I wrote my plan out in December the year prior. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is my plan if I decide to compete for this show.
And you just followed it?
Well, yeah, that was the plan.
Yeah.
But then every time I messed up, I pivoted and I adjusted. And there was so many basic things that I encourage clients every week, and it didn't register to myself because there's so much going on when you're in prep and heavily restricted and also focused on having to look a particular way at the end of the 6 months sort of a thing.
It's a weird thing, hey, because I did a photo shoot and I did it in my prep in about 4 weeks, which I would not recommend.
Fitness.
Anybody. I don't know how much I lost, but I got to very, very lean. But it's a weird experience. It's a good experience working towards something like that. I really enjoy the process, but because there's a certain amount of pressure that makes you do it.
Yeah.
But it's not. I guess that it's not healthy.
No.
You can do it healthier ways. but it's not healthy.
Can you do it healthier ways? So that's
Yeah.
yeah. I think for my prep, so next
Healthier relative to the way that some people do it.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to compete next year.
Cool.
That's the long-term plan. And with that, I've already picked my coach. I'm pretty sure they don't know it yet, but maybe they'll listen to this and they'll find out. But they, in terms of sort of having,
Well, you have to tell us who the coach is.
oh, maybe I dropped the name. What if I change my mind? I won't. I've been pretty set. I'm very committed.
Right. Okay.
But,
it's a very big podcast, so the likelihood of them hearing it is
very high.
Very high.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, in terms of my prep for hindsight, that was what I got the most out of because it was such a spiritual experience, which I never understood. I read the David Goggins books before I prepped, and then I read them during my prep as my Bible. And I never understood, I thought I understood. Okay, let me go back. I thought I understood what what gets released when you're in, say, an ultra marathon and you're fighting your demons, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And I thought I knew that. And then when I did the prep, and I had so many sort of mental health things come up that I thought I'd sorted through.
Yeah.
And so many that I really felt like I didn't get the right support, but I also didn't reach out for the right support, which I think is a huge thing too. And I remember I was so lucky. One of my girlfriends, who, shameless plug, Alex, one of my girlfriends, she reached out to me to ask to train, and every day I was having sort of suicidal thoughts, but not acting on them. Like I knew they were just intrusive thoughts, but I was like, fuck, I would rather be dead. And I was like, but I've told people I'm doing this show. Stupidest reason to prep.
Yeah.
But I remember she was like, oh, let's go to the gym, like let's train together. And I did every flaky thing under the sun with those texts to try and get out of it. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to be there for another hour. I've had something come up. She's like, all good, I'll wait. And she did not let up. And so I got to the gym eventually, and I was like, and I really, I was like, whatever, let's just get this over and done with. And it was the most beneficial and significant moment of my prep, where I was like, towards the end of it as well, this is maybe the last 8 weeks, and I was like, wow, I feel so good having spent time with one of my girlfriends. Like, just because when you're restricting your food, and a lot of the people around me thought it was quite weird and all that sort of, a lot of people, when you are in prep and then you start to get like skinny and they're like, this isn't healthy anymore. It's not looking like a fun goal.
I'm shredded.
Yeah. But
it's mad.
it made me so much more appreciative of your support network, and making sure that, I think from the get-go with the prep, you need to have a support network and people who appreciate, understand, and can sort of call you out when I'm going through something. I'll be a recluse, but I'll be like, no one reaching out to me confirms that, like, I'm not worthy of anyone reaching out to me. And so that was in prep. That was what I started to do. And then living alone, it was doubled down on that. So I was very grateful for my clients, and very grateful for them putting up with me for the last 12 weeks as well, where I was real angry. I was like, that's not the right technique. But having a support network.
Very short words become hard.
Yeah. You just stand there on the wall But yeah, having a support network for a goal like that, because 4 weeks, 8 weeks even, it's like you can stay focused with your coach and you can get through it. And you'll have your hard times, but that one person can be enough. But I really think for something to that extent, that's a bit more of like a macro, like half a year of dieting practically, you need to have multiple sort of people that you can tap into and elect for these, like, okay, I need a bit of girl time. Like, I need a bit of, there was one time I went almost 5 or 6 weeks without seeing my godchildren, because I saw it as a rigmarole of, like, I don't want to bother them. Like, I'm in such a low mood. I've got cardio to do, like any sort of procrastinating excuse. And then every time I saw them, I felt so good.
Yeah.
And so there's so many things on the back end of prep now. I've been like, that was the best thing I ever did, and I can't wait to do it again, knowing what I know now, and then electing the right support systems in place.
Yeah.
As well.
Because at that time as well, like, you can't look forward to food really.
And for me, I was almost scared of food, because I didn't realize, with every photo shoot prep that I had previously done, which I think was 4 at that time, I didn't realize that when I was in a diet, I would eat until I was full, and I would snack if I ever felt slightly hungry, which was fine because I could fit most of it into my calories. I'd only go over every now and then. It was just a photo shoot, so how I showed up on the day, I knew I was proud of my efforts anyways. But it made me realize with prep and looking forward to food and enjoying food, that sort of a thing, I started to fear it so much because I was so scared of being hungry.
Yeah.
And so I found myself just making these weird low-calorie combinations of
Yeah.
food and never feeling energized or anything as well.
Yeah.
And it was only in the last, again, maybe 3 or 4 weeks where having some frequent check-ins with someone else to oversee everything, to look at everything, it was like, oh, why don't we sort of change this meal X, Y, Z? It's like your fats are at 25 grams a day and you need a minimum of 40 if you want to be feeling good. And I like for my body weight at the time, and I remember adjusting my fats and I was like, but it's less food. How am I going to make it? And I felt so good.
Yeah.
And it's all these things that, yeah, it's, you definitely can't look forward to food. But I was so like scared almost of food and scared of being hungry. And I felt like such a failure every time I was hungry as well.
Yeah.
And then it was after prep, I saw this video on Instagram of a guy that said, he's like, when you're prepping, like being hungry is confirmation you're in a deficit. Like it's okay. And I remember seeing that and I'm like, that's so true. And then ever since then, I've been like, wow, I really spent the whole 6 months like running away from hunger.
Yeah.
And it was a bigger issue that I need to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the motivation? What was the motivation behind doing then, and what's the motivation for the next one?
The motivation behind doing it back then, last year, ages ago, was...
How long ago was it? 6 months ago?
Yeah, about 8 months ago now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And the motivation back then was I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it because I had looked at these women who had competed for years. And I didn't realize that sort of my why, it was definitely, I thought it was deep at the time. But then as we got into prep, I was like, I hate this, but I'm too stubborn to bail out.
Yeah.
I was like I would complain about it all the time, which didn't make it any better. But I was just too stubborn to not do it. I was like, there's no way I'm not doing it. And I remember my partner at the time, he was like, you know, if you decide not to compete, like I will support you in that. Like that's okay. And I was like, just because you said that, I'm definitely doing it now. Like way too stubborn.
Yeah.
But so that was my sort of why back then, was like I want to prove to myself I can do it, which just wasn't a deep enough why for the melting pot that prep is.
Yeah, yeah.
And the stubbornness got me to the end. But
which is kind of a good thing at a point, but if it turns into a bad thing, then it's
yeah. But I think the next time I want to do it justice.
Yep.
I want to win.
But what did you place?
8th. But it wasn't
pretty good.
Thank you. I think it was only like 12 people.
That's all right.
But
still beat 4 people.
Yes. No,
they suck. And you beat them.
I am the winner in my eyes. No,
but it's a big accomplishment. It's not easy to do, and it's a scary, scary thing, obviously.
Well, I want to do it because I had again so much, like so many mental health things came up, but I had so much self, like loathing, and so much sort of, and I know that is more than likely to sort of recur again. But I really want to, in this next prep, do it justice, not sort of blindly listen to the first person I speak to with something. Because I think that was another thing too. There were little things where I sacrificed parts of myself because I trusted what someone else said about sort of how long my hair should be on the stage. Yeah. And then the chick that came first. Not that, again, she absolutely deserved to win. But she had such beautiful long hair down to her hips. Most of the girls do. And usually I do as well. Yeah. And then I remember someone had told me, they're like, no, it's too much hair, like you've got dark. And little things like that where I went on stage and I didn't feel myself. Yeah. Like I'd never had my makeup done before, like by a makeup artist. And so backstage, I've showed them one photo from this one girl who we had different skin tones, different eye colors, different facial structure. And now I look back at those photos and I'm like, damn. But there's so much now where I didn't pay attention to particular things that would have made me feel better on stage, even though I had the best time. Like, I honestly loved it. I can't wait to do it again for being on stage as well. But yeah, this time I want to give it the justice it deserves, the process, knowing what I know now and investing in the right support early as well. So that ideally I win my division, but also, again, to be able to do it from a space of sort of love and compassion for myself with the discipline, because that's a lot of people will say, and like a lot of competitors will also say, like self-discipline is the strongest form of self-love. And it's like, if you're a high functioning individual who, whether you're anxious, you're depressed, like you're going to put yourself through the grinder, all of a sudden it's not self-love anymore.
No,
and like
punishment.
it was so much punishment. Like there was, towards the end of my prep, I was doing 60 minutes of like cardio a day. And because I'd started on the stair climber early, I felt obliged to do every session on the stair climber. So 60 minutes of cardio a day. One day was 90 minutes, and it was all on the stair climber. Like I tried to do like the walking on the treadmill, that sort of a thing, and I just hated it. That and my step target was 20K a day.
Yeah.
And so it's all these
plus the
list, took the watch off for the low intensity steady state on the stair climber. And it's like, there was so much, no matter what I did, I was like, yes, ticked that box off. And I was like, I still feel like a failure. I'm still not lean enough. I'm still not. And it's like, instead of being like, wow, look at these changes that are happening to my body, which every photo shoot prep, that's what I'd been like.
Yeah.
And every photo shoot prep, I hadn't obviously been as lean as I was on stage, but it's like, I look and it's like, I've got so much more muscle. And so I think I stitched myself up as well, deciding to have, in the first 3 months of the diet, also not being able to train to full capacity and really not being able to train. I think it was the last 4 weeks, I was finally deadlifting like 60 kilos.
Yeah. Which would make a big difference in that you couldn't train.
Well, it's retaining muscle mass when you're someone who usually is sort of lifting closer, like, I was doing for probably like 4 months of the prep, at least, doing closer to like 40 to 60% of my max, like 4 to 6 RPE, which is a warm-up. And I'm like, but you can technically do lots of reps and still retain muscle mass if you're an old person who has never trained.
And who wants to do a lot of reps and retain a lot of muscle mass?
And I tried, and it just builds up so much lactic acid, and you don't have the carbs to be able to tolerate the higher reps as well. So there were so many things where FOMO got the better of me, stubbornness got me through, and like I look back now and I'm like, damn, if you had competed in the US where they're not as sort of hard and athletic as they are in Australia for the WBFF, which is now FMG. In the US, it's like, and that's, I remember my posing coach was like, in the US, you'd probably come first. And I was like, you are tooting my horn. But as I look back,
boost is good.
Well, as I look back at that, and I'm like, I actually, like, I look really good. Like, I look like someone who is competitive.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time just being like, you're such a failure. Like, I can't believe you're still doing this.
It's crazy what low calories will do to brain function.
Yeah. Devastating. But so next time I want to have, there's so many other things I'll have in place, including a really strong support network, because I didn't elect that early on. And so as it got to the end, I just felt more alone. And even when people reached out, I was like, I'm such a bore. I'm so annoying to them. Yeah. Whereas I feel like telling people at the start, you are my elected person. Yeah. Then it's like you come and you're like, I know I'm really annoying today, but I also know you love me, so it's okay.
You've been elected, which is an honour.
Yeah, you should feel grateful that I am here, annoyed and hungry, but want to hang out.
Yes, and I will complain about the choice that I made to be hungry. Do you coach any girls for that?
Not anymore. So I've coached 2 girls to prep.
Yeah.
And I should really remember what Chelsea came. It's on the tip of my tongue. I think she came 4.
Cool.
I feel like I'm butchering that. Lauren the year before came 2nd.
Cool.
And I only remember because I was like, I screamed at it was just weird the way that they'd placed her around. And it was such a significant moment where I was like, oh my God, I can't believe we actually did that. Because it was my first person that I'd prepped as well. Yeah. But since going through it on my own, now I would not willingly put anyone else through that. Yeah. I definitely, and I think that's the thing, I will do it myself. Yeah. Because I want to, it's my choice. I understand the ramifications of what I'm choosing to potentially jeopardize. Like I lost my cycle 3 months out to competing as well. for the sake of the sport. But yeah,
Is it
so
a
now
sport?
I wouldn't take anyone on.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah,
And you've obviously got to beat those two results because you got a fourth and a second, so you have to get first.
I must. Yeah, I think I just really, there's so much growth that occurs in prep. And one thing a lot of repeat offenders who compete say is that like you learn new things every prep and new things come up and new things go wrong.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's weird when you're so into the sport and the process and the like camaraderie when you let it be a camaraderie as well. Because as I remember as well when I finally started group posing classes and then at the end backstage, although I looked at myself and I was like, I don't deserve to be here. It was so cool being with the same group that we'd all been sort of hungry and dying on a Sunday at posing school.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was so cool for us to all be there because I liken bodybuilding to like at least for sort of the more fashionable bodybuilding opposed to like IFBB, which is much more hardcore. But for FMG or what used to be the WBFF, it's so much more pizzazz and like glitz and glam. What's the word I'm looking for? It's so much more sort of beauty pageant as well as the bodybuilding aspect of things.
Yeah.
And the great thing is I really enjoyed that part of it, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But I understand the people who like it's just bodybuilding, IFBB, let's go.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I was like, I love the individual posing, like making my own sort of little flair, like.
Yeah. So
all
they
that
don't
sort of
have
thing.
individual posing in IFBB, or
In IFBB, I think you can have a routine.
Yeah.
On your own on stage, and then you do the like quarter turn to the left and
mandatory poses.
Yeah. And whereas it's the whole sort of being on stage with such a big group of females, and it's like a pose off.
Yeah.
But everyone's like before you're on stage where you're standing at that line, like you're next on sort of a thing. All the girls are fixing up each other's hair, helping you like put a band on if you're pumping up, helping you pump up. Like it's such a beautiful sort of environment.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't understand at first why they didn't let coaches backstage, but I did because I've also been to an IFBB show where backstage it's like where I was, no one was talking to anyone.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was coaches and like the clients lying on the floor trying not to ruin their tan. Whereas, backstage at the WBFF, which is now FMG, all the girls, like, we're all sitting in circles, like, handing out our foods and, like, showing photos. Like, it's such a beautiful sort of...
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Cool, positive environment.
Yeah, which is nice.
And you can just all bond over the fact that you haven't eaten a whole lot for the last hour.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And it's even seeing everyone's bikinis. Like, I remember looking at everyone's bikinis, and it's just so much because, again, IFBB, you sort of have your standard competition bikini.
Yeah.
Whereas WBFF, you've got the theme wear, you've got everyone's evening gowns. And so if you're like a bit of a girly girl and you like all of that, then it's awesome. And I used to think I was very much not a girly girl, but I absolutely love it.
Cool. That's really, really cool. Okay, so that sounds like a really, really cool experience for you, and I look forward to seeing how you do on the next one. So that kind of is a good segue to what are your top 3 proudest moments? Can be in the industry, outside of the industry, whatever it is.
I'll be like getting my first cat.
Do you only have one cat?
No, I have 3.
Okay. First cat, second cat. Can you
get a fourth?
Well, yeah. Have you seen that reel of? It's like I've seen it for German Shepherds. It's like a voiceover. Or the audio is like, oh, I've got one. It's cute. It's cute. Well, if I get one, I've got to get another one.
Friend.
And then he needs a friend. And then, well, if you might get the whole set. And
yeah.
I'm sure that's a thing for cat reels as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So first cat.
So that's as much as I want to call Miss Jeannie my proudest moment. I think such a huge thing was Surrey One Playground, but moving from Fitness Playground to a gym where, because with Fitness Playground at the time, how you would have a particular amount of clients and then they would take a little percentage from each session, that sort of a thing. Moving to a gym where it's like, it doesn't matter if you have 10 clients in 1 week or none, like you are paying rent. You are locked in this contract. What did I sign? I think it was like a yearly PT contract.
Yeah. Sink or swim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that sink or swim moment
Yeah.
is, I feel so, I tend to do something like I get committed very quickly and will fail forward. Like I want to go through it. Whereas some people like to stand back, analyze everything. I'm very much like, this is great. We only live once. Let's fucking go.
Jump into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like moving to a gym where I then had to pay rent.
Yeah.
It was like there's no more sort of, oh, like someone cancelled. It's all right. We'll make do.
Yeah. Get another coffee.
Yeah, get another coffee, do a bit of stretching, sleep in the hammocks.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Hey, they were comfy hammocks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so definitely taking that step, because I think then as
Big
well,
step.
where I was only, I think I'd been 18 for like 6 months maybe.
Yeah.
And I remember going into that gym that I worked at in Coogee after FP, and I just knew I had such a confidence about myself not because of like being the youngest PT in there or being like, you know, like a local in the area, that sort of a thing. It was because I knew that my knowledge from what I had learned in the year that I was at FP, I was like, I know what I have is second to none.
Yeah.
And I know no one else has the same sort of repertoire to the degree that I have it, with the leverage that I have of being a younger female in the gym, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I think it's also, back then it was a much more of a male-dominated industry, but you had, when it came to female coaches, you had sort of the three main archetypes. You had like the coaches who were much more into running, wore like capri tights all the time, so the tights that stop at the kneecap. I don't want to see that. But yeah, and they're like,
okay, enough said.
Well, yeah, like capri tights, run, like do a lot of sort of more athletic stuff. Hit stuff, have great quads, no ass. So that's one archetype. You then have the very sort of like yoga PTs.
Yeah.
And so the ones who are very much like, can still train like an absolute boss, but are very much sort of like, okay, what do you want to do? We're going to do a bit of Pilates with like a deadlift, but it's going to be a Romanian deadlift holding onto a cardboard box, like holding onto a yoga block.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you have sort of the like more strength coach female, which is a category I fall into, who's like a little bit more of that, I guess, no BS approach, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And I knew going into there that I was the only coach like that.
Yeah.
And so I knew that sort of leverage point of being like, because ideally, and this is one thing where it's not sort of, not trying to toot coaches' horns, because it's tooting both of our horns at the same time. But it's like when a client comes to you, they're inspired by you, and they're inspired by the energy that you bring, the energy you show up as, like what that is.
Yeah.
And then to top it off, you train and you look super strong, that sort of a thing. And I knew going into there that little bit, like that gets sales, that gets consultations. But I knew the knowledge that I had collected from Fitness Playground was second to none. And that from there, I'd be able to really create a really good experience if it didn't work out. But I literally had no doubt that it wouldn't work out. I knew it was going to be just fucking awesome there. So that was definitely one of my proudest.
Yeah, two more.
Okay. Another time, and this is probably a little bit more like woo-woo, but in terms of sort of visualization, manifestation, all that jazz, in terms of writing out my ideal life, and writing out sort of what that looked like in terms of doing more online work and moving my business online, which I guess is sort of ties in. We can put because I can't think of like the top three. I'm just thinking of the times I was proud.
These are the sound bites for you and your reels. Because you probably don't. I want people to share this stuff, because you wouldn't be like set up a camera and be like, my proudest moment is this. But if I ask you that, then what you just said comes out as your proudest moment, because the way that you conveyed it. So whatever it is, just
that's definitely my top one.
Yeah,
but
it's pretty cool. The big reason why I started a fitness program, and I probably still haven't left, is because it is harder to move into that model, and it's a big achievement.
Yeah, I think it's it's a little bit of luck and strategy as well. So it's moving into sort of gym. There's always going to be people coming through, that sort of a thing anyways. But the gym that I went to, in terms of knowing it would work, there was only like another 10 PTs.
Yeah.
Whereas it can be, if you've got sort of, say, I know Fitness First can have sometimes between like 15 and 25 PTs in the same gym.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone has 4 or 5 qualifications that are all the same.
Yeah.
And it starts to get you have to make yourself stand out.
Yeah.
That sort of a thing.
And very competitive.
Yeah, and it's like as a new fish as well. So I was lucky. I'd been working at that gym on reception for years before becoming a PT.
Yeah.
So when I went back, and the cafe around the corner I worked at for the years before that.
Yeah.
So I had many sort of little lucks on my side.
Mm-hmm.
And then but again, that gets sales,
Yeah.
but what keeps people.
Yeah.
And that's what I knew, like undoubtedly with the knowledge that I'd learned from Fitness Playground, that I was like, this is going to work.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's really, really cool.
Mm.
Okay, well, we don't need to do 2 more. Let's do, what are your top 10 exercises and why for you, not clients?
For me, not clients. Can I say deadlift 5 times?
No deadlifts on this podcast.
Oh, no.
I'm joking.
So,
Back squat, front squat, over. No.
yeah, front foot elevated split squat,
Yeah.
heel elevated split squat.
It's pretty much just my exercise library.
Just quads.
Yeah.
So a definite favourite is a step up.
Yeah, cool.
And at the moment, the ones that I'm loving is we have a little V squat at the gym.
Yeah, okay.
And it's just easy because it's extremely stable.
Yeah.
And so you just prop your shoulders underneath and you do a bit of a step up using the platform, or a cable step up.
Yep.
And I find they just feel you can really line your foot up with your glute max and be able to get a lot out of your glute max with that push in the stretched position, so at the bottom. But then throughout, you just feel it absolutely light up.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, in terms of, again, the stability aspect of either the V squat or the cables, where you're sort of fixed into a position, you're not having to use as many of your stabilizers to hit just your glutes.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas then what I do anyways is a lot of clients will have lunge or Bulgarian split squat variations. So I guess step up. Next one would be Bulgarian split squat.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll definitely maneuver through particular programs where they might have more stability and less stability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's definitely the two.
What would you do for more stability and what would you do for less stability?
So for more stability, I would do a hand-supported Bulgarian split squat, holding onto one hand on a support. So either a stick if you haven't got anywhere to hold on to, or the side of a squat rack. And then make sure you set up the bench in the right spot as well, so it's not too close or not too far away. So fiddle around with it a little bit. And then for one with a little less stability, I do a contralateral, so holding the dumbbell in one hand, or you can do 2 dumbbells dual. It's still very hard to stabilize Bulgarian without the right amount of practice and repetition.
Shit exercise.
Thank you. But
No,
yeah,
they are good. They are good.
yeah, loving as well. Hack squat's obviously a favorite, but I really love as well hack squat, pendulum squat, and then a Smith machine high bar squat as well. So sorry, heel elevated, but also high bar as well. I just love being able to put your body in a position where you can go ass to grass.
Yeah.
And for myself personally, but then also for a lot of my clients whose goals are bigger quads and who might not have the sort of athletic structure to want to persevere with the barbell squats, it's much more applicable. And so that was something for myself. It's only now I'm just getting back into squats, and front squats are much more comfortable and I can load them heavier than I can back squats.
Interesting.
But well, that's just the positioning of the bar and the stretching of my pegs.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But hack squats, and again, Smith machine squats, where you can angle and get a really nice ass to grass position.
Yeah.
Absolutely love.
Yeah.
And then, they get that depth as well, because we're no half-ass Harrys here.
No.
No.
Not on this podcast.
No way.
Definitely not on
Yeah.
this podcast.
Yeah.
One of my greatest achievements, and it's very low down to compared to some others, but I had the heaviest, deepest, beltless back squat at the powerlifting comp that I did last year.
Of course you did.
And I was
that doesn't even surprise me.
no, I know, but
Well,
everybody, they had like a live feed and the commentators on it were like losing it, like, "Who did
What is
this?"
this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
What would you say if you had to give 2 to 3 tips for someone to get an ass to grass squat? What would be your 3 tips?
What would be my 3 tips? I think one of the most important things is learn how to organize your hips and ribs. I think with a barbell squat, the upright torso is the least important thing for everybody. I think your torso will end up where your torso will end up if you line your hips and ribs up to where they should be, close to neutral. My squat, and your squat as well too, you've got a longer torso relative to legs, so you end up in that quaddy upright squat.
We
But
both have like the most upright squats I've ever seen.
yeah, but I don't think about trying to keep my torso upright. In fact, I try to pull my rib cage down as hard as I can and then pull the bar as hard as I can on the other side.
Yeah.
But just my leverages put me in that position. So I think brace first, learn to brace. Elevate the heels is usually a really, really good one. It makes it a lot easier from a mobility standpoint for the hips, knees and ankles to allow you to go into a deep squat position without having to try to strain from a mobility perspective or a mobility standpoint. I think sometimes people, and it's kind of gone in the industry now, but people are like, oh, it's not natural to elevate your heels. It's not natural to do anything we do in the gym. Our body hates it to a certain extent.
Oh, 100%.
And that's why it gets us stronger, because it's an adaptation to a stimulus or a stressor that it just doesn't like. So I think that is going to be a really, really good one. And not going straight to a barbell squat. Like it's my favorite exercise, but I would like to get more clients to do a high bar back squat, but working in a busy gym, we've got 6 squat racks available. Peak times is really, really hard to get, so it's not going to be even efficient use of time if we're waiting for a period of time for a squat rack. And so I guess to my point, start with a front-loaded squat or a pendulum squat or a hack squat or something like that, because they allow you to take it through the range of motion. If you're really interested in working on a back squat, think of it more like a skill that you would any other thing. And obviously what you're saying there is that your goal is, what I take from it, your goal is predominantly bodybuilding and body composition, which is indicative of your training, and that you use variations where you are more stable, so you can then put more stress on the muscle and elicit a higher work output, more stress, all that sort of things, and then get a better result. But yeah, so what did I say? Hips and ribs, elevate the heels, and then don't go to a back squat unless you want to do it, but whatever variation of the squat, do it more frequently. I think one thing, people know me that I like to squat, most days of the week.
Because, do you?
Yeah,
I had no idea.
No one knows it actually. That's one of my top
Fun fact Friday.
Fun fact. But I think for me, I got better at it when I practiced it a lot, and I like it. I think you can train it at a higher frequency than you can do a deadlift, because while you're loading of the spine, you're not exposing the lumbar to a greater magnitude of the load of it actually having to hold in extension.
Yeah.
I think if you load it appropriately, you can load it more frequently, and then you can practice the skill to a higher degree, and then you can end up with a better squat, and it's less intimidating. So, yeah, and come see me. That's tip number 4.
Exactly.
Or Zoe.
That's literally, the game changed for clients, but then also myself, when starting to see a squat as a skill.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people may come in, they're like, I want a barbell squat. Or why do you want a barbell squat? I want big legs. I was like, okay, well, we can do barbell squats, but they might not be like, to what priority is going to be more important to you? Because it's another thing. If someone's like, I just want to be really fucking athletic, it's like, fantastic. Like, this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
But not that it's any less fun bodybuilding, but it's your preference and sort of the way that you program for someone who, they're like, I want to be able to squat, but I also want big legs. Yeah. It's like, cool. So which priority comes first? Because that will dictate how we write the program.
Yeah. And then go from there. And I think they can be very effective from a hypertrophy standpoint if you can
do them properly.
And the limiting factor is not always, it takes a long time to get to the point where your legs are the limiting factor on the squat, or close to the limiting factor.
Yeah.
I can squat up to my maximum now and get close to my quads being the limiting factor, but it's not going to be the same as what a pendulum squat would be or anything like that. I think I don't have the biggest legs, but I have some quad hypertrophy from squatting quite frequently. And I think it's the cumulative volume that is the thing that causes the gains, as opposed to the higher intensity, although I do train them at a higher intensity than if I'm doing lower rep stuff. But Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's the coolest exercise ever. But no, actually, no, I'd probably say like a clean and jerk or a snatch is one of the cooler exercises ever. But I think it depends on your approach. If you like you said, you want to be athletic, you want to be able to barbell back squat. And I would argue as well, when you do learn to barbell back squat and you can do it efficiently, it can be very efficient at building muscle mass relative to a machine if we put it into the context that people train in a busy gym. And for, for instance, we have one pendulum squat. It because people know that it's a good piece of machinery. People use it quite a lot. Peak times, the squat racks are busy, but we have 6 opportunities, maybe 7 opportunities to do a back squat.
Yeah.
And then we've got one opportunity if, sometimes if people share, you can get 2 or 3 people on it, but it can become a bit of an issue. So again, that weighting issue, I think of a lot when I program, I try to take those things into an account where if someone can execute a squat at a high degree of skill with a barbell, excellent, go for it. But then you would have some sort of accessory that will trail off to be a little bit higher volume or take closer proximity to failure. Because the proximity to failure that you can get on a squat is dangerous when you go far down that line. And it also doesn't serve for different types of muscle fiber types. So it might be good for your type 2. Yes, type 2. Just had a mental blank.
Yeah.
But it's not really, really good for your type 1. So your fast and slower twitch because you don't want to load it past like 10 reps really.
Yeah, and I find one thing as well that's important to note for the girlies listening. I feel like for a period of time where I was doing lots of barbell squats, I feel like that was one of the best sort of physiques that I had. And I feel like that's largely the squats, they obviously work your legs a lot, but they also are very similar to a deadlift. And to be honest, I probably deadlifted the same amount that I squatted. There's only been a few occasions where I've done more squats for periods of time than deadies. But it's a full body exercise. And it's like a lot of people want a stronger core, want sort of thicker legs, want good glutes. It's like your glutes are going to control the direction in which your knees can go in your squat. Like the variations of squat are endless. There's so many different types you can do as well. But you have to be strong through your back. You have to be strong through your postural muscles, and you have to be strong through your core. So I absolutely love it. For someone who wants to commit to the skill of squatting, I absolutely love pushing it.
And it's just so gangster as well. Like if you walk into...
When you do a good squat...
Everybody stops and stares.
Yeah.
That's all I do it for, is just people to look at me.
That external validation.
It's a part of it, not the only thing. So we got, 2 or 3 exercises in there before I rudely Kelly. What do we got? Step up.
So step up,
Bulgarian
split squat. We've got a hack squat, pendulum squat, Smith machine squat.
So you're going all of them? Yeah.
We're going all 3.
All 3? Yeah, cool. I like the theme of quads and lower body and glutes.
Well, I think that's something as well, and this very personal preference, but I used to really neglect my quads. And just focus all on glutes. And it's as someone who has like a much more lower body dominant in terms of my proportions, it's like having strong legs is way cooler than just having like a nice butt, but then sort of looking at your thighs and being like, I wish they were a bit stronger. And then doing a squat and having your main limiting factor being your quads. Because that was something that I remember when I was progressing with my squat for a long time, and I had to go through the rigmarole of taking my weight right back again after like 5 years, still like, because I didn't learn what I needed to sort of prioritize. And when I finally stopped like rushing the bottom when it got too heavy, when I finally really sat in that pause, really sat in that depth, really did all the accessory work necessary to grow my quads, then all of a sudden the squats were great. And it's like, it's such a great exercise. So I know I haven't mentioned them yet, which is also because I haven't really done as many over the last year. Because stabilizing a barbell has just been different for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I think as well, on that, and it's so common with girls to just go glutes. You're going to end up with knee injuries if your knees are really weak.
Yeah.
And I've worked with a lot of female PTs, like, oh, my knee hurts here, my knee hurts here, you know, whatever it might be. How many times are you actually squatting a week, and how many glute and hamstring exercises you're doing? No wonder your hips are really tight all the time and your knees hurt, because you never train your knees and you're constantly training your glutes, which is excellent. And I actually would probably, across all my programming, I program always more posterior chain stuff for the lower body than I do quad stuff, because I think it's sensible. But you still got to have a little bit more of the balance in there as well, because a lot of girls I've trained, the PTs at Surrey, they've always got knee injuries, and then when we get them to squat, and they've usually got back injuries as well too, because it's just overloaded that posterior chain, which is all good, but just give some love to the quads as well too.
Well, that's the thing, and this is why, again, I very much like an ass to grass squat, and you can appreciate this, but also where you can go ass to grass. So, again, what I've done for the better part of the year has been more machine-based ass to grass exercises. But in saying that, things like your front foot dominant split squat, so like a quad dominant split squat, you want to get as much range through your joints as possible, because like the position that you train is the position you will adopt.
Yeah.
So it's, if you are untrained in the position where your knees are bent to like folded into each other, if you are untrained in that position, then the likelihood that you fall over, if it's falling downstairs at someone's house, or if it's falling, like anything, the likelihood you're able to catch yourself and your tendons and ligaments and your muscles just go, I got us, is extremely low. And then once you have an injury, you have to regress and then train that area anyways. It's like, why not tick it off in the process? Because the goal is to be the physique that you build in this 12 months that we are currently in is the one that ideally you want to be building upon in a decade's time. Not just like, oh, I had a really good ass in 2024. Like, good on you, bro. Like, sis.
And then you have back and knee pain for the rest of your life. Cool.
Wow. Celebrate.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a funny one. There was such a big thing in the industry for a long time where it was demonized to train your quads. That's probably why I went down the route of I'm just going to squat all the time as well too, because whatever.
Stubborn.
Stubborn. Whatever is like the hard thing, because everybody deadlifted a lot and they had a big deadlift, and I was like, well, I'll just go the opposite direction. Now I have a really weak deadlift.
Well, I think, and that's like similar, sort of not. But that's where it's like the delayed gratification as well. It's like it's important that you focus on your one thing that you really are passionate about, because you don't become an expert and a jack of all trades. So you've done the right thing with your squat. But it's appreciating like, oh, I should still deadlift for balance, or I should still train XYZ for balance. And that's something that I feel like a lot of, definitely for us as coaches, we can sort of, we appreciate it a lot more than, say, someone Gen Pop who's hiring a coach. So someone who has an office job, like used to do F45, then got a back injury or a knee injury or whatever, and now they're seeing a strength coach. It's very easy to get caught up in the, I want a firm butt now. Like, I want abs now. And it's like, but how do you want to look in 10 years' time? Like, how do you want to look in 5 years' time? Like, how do you want to look by Christmas this year? Like, do you want to be skinny, or do you want to be like firm and toned? And I hate those words, but I equally love them. Because I think when you like firm and toned for a female, we're like, oh, this is exactly how I want to look, strong, athletic, like, but firm and toned, to achieve that, it's the misconception of like toning and firming, where it's, once you understand like, oh, I need to get strong and I need to eat if I want this, and I want to have something to build upon over the next decade, opposed to sort of, I've got to starve myself so I can look good in a bikini in 2 months in Europe. And it's like, but what about after? Like, what about the fact that in Europe you're not going to be training and you're going to be eating heaps? Like, wouldn't you want your metabolism and your muscles to utilize more of that? So you come back and you're like, I had a really great time and my body actually doesn't look that different. Like, the amount of clients I've had that have gone on holidays and come back the exact same weight and have come back being like, I actually don't feel too much different to before I left, and have felt strong and happy in their bodies and everything else. It's incredible, that difference, when you can tap into that and you can forget about that instant gratification that it's very easy to, if you're not in the field, it's very easy to hold on to that and think that that's all that matters.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we'll build muscle later.
Mm.
And it's like, no, now is later.
You've
We're
got to
doing it.
you've got to get jump straight on it. As well, I think in that having a focus on building your diet and your metabolism, and then your building your physique and your performance levels makes the whole process a lot more engaging as well too. Because if it's just about getting skinnier or getting leaner and just burning calories, it's boring as shit, and you're not going to do it for a long period of time. Like, my plan is I want to be able to squat forever, and it's obviously going to be lighter at a point, but being able to do that and having a decent performance, why there's no reason why you can't if you always do, because if you always do, then it's the thing, like you said, it's the position you adopt, and then you have that ability to do so. And to your point as well of when you go on a holiday, if you haven't spent that time where you are building your physique and building your metabolism, you don't necessarily need to do it to like earn the rest. But then one of the things that my clients, I've had a few say, they want to have more flexibility with their diet. And to do that, you need to probably build to a point where you weren't before to be able to support. Like, I've had clients go on holidays recently and they get leaner, not intentionally, like just go enjoy yourself, eat the food that you want to eat, have the fun that you want to have, because that's what it's for. But because we've built their training and built their performance and built their diet where they can support their training and support their performance, that to a point for some people it might be a little bit more uncomfortable. I've had a girl say it's unnatural, not trying to force feed, but it's like you ask for an unnatural level of performance from your body, in that it has no care about you squatting whatever weight you want to squat. It doesn't care about the deadlift that you want to do. It's really cool and I'm all about it, but it's unnatural. It's unnatural. So when you need to eat to support that, and then anyway, she's then gone on holidays and she's ate what she's wanted, but because we put her in a good spot and she was stronger than ever, had more energy than ever, she inevitably ate a lower amount. And then you don't have those big ups and downs as well too, where you're just fantasizing about the food at the end of the tunnel. Then you get the big ups and downs, and but it takes a long time to get to that as well, to be able to have that flexibility that, it's 3 to 6 to, 12, 18 months from now. What do you want to look like in 10 years time? What do you want to feel?
Yeah, well, and it's that constant, so much of it is mindset when it comes down to that. And eating more, like for guys, I'm not a guy. I'm not going to try and project. But like for us women, I get so many women who I'm like, you're going to see better results if we maybe eat in a slight surplus, and so sometimes we might build up to a surplus where it's like we start at maintenance, we wait for your weight to go down, and then we take a slightly bigger jump. And it's like, ooh. But it's being able to fully appreciate the seasons that your body goes through, and be like, if you want to be, say, a big CEO of your company and climb the corporate ladder, you don't just go, I'm applying for the CEO position tomorrow. Like, you can, but if you're coming in as, what are they called, apprentices, if you're coming in as like a freshie, that's what we're calling it, freshies, and you're like, oh, the big CEO, like I want to be that. It's like, if you don't know how to hold yourself to that standard and that caliber of a businesswoman or a businessman, it's you can go like and see if dumb luck and if failing forward gets you there, amazing. But it's like a lot of the times we have to do work and inner work to be able to appreciate the external sort of benefits that we might get from that. So it's like, for a lot of people and females, when it comes to eating more, it's like sometimes we first have to nurture, like, how about let's just start at maintenance? And then it's like, after maintenance, it's like, cool, you're feeling good, you're looking good. It's like, it's not the end of the world if we spend the next 1 month and then we can reassess. Like, I ideally want to spend 3 months, and I'll always be clear with clients with this. I'll be like, I think you should do 3 to 6 months of a build. But when we get to the first 4 weeks, let's see how you're feeling, and then let's commit to an extended date there. Because otherwise it's so easy to, you in a build for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and you're like, I'm fat, I'm not doing this. And so then you restrict again, and you just repeat the same cycle that you've been repeating for decades, some people.
To make meaningful change, it takes a long time.
Yeah, and it takes commitment and going through the sticky, like the sticky shit you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, oh, you know, I like dieting, I like training, I don't have my goal physique.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's probably that one thing you keep fucking avoiding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that constant dieting is stopping you from getting to your goal physique.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's a funny thing that Chris Mavros says. There's been a couple of girls that are quite small, and you can see in the gym, and you can see that they're doing all the right things from a training perspective for the most part. Like they're in there, they're ripping in, and he's like, the way that she wants to look is just, it's obviously very oversimplified, and you know Chris Mavros. He's like, she's just like 500 calories away from looking like what she wants to look like, and it's to the point of like that will then positively upregulate everything in your body as well too. So you're going to have better brain function, you're going to have better energy, you're going to probably have, because of those things, you probably have better relationships, and you'll have better training, you'll have all these sorts of things. It's a very simplified answer, and he wouldn't tell that to a client. But it's like, as you build that, you allow yourself to achieve the unnatural level of performance that you're essentially after, and then get to that goal physique on the other side of it. But I've been in the other side of it as well too, of being really low and really restricted for a long period of time.
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
Well, I had a client who she really wanted a big butt, and she did for years, and just couldn't get past like her max amount of carbs per day, like really pushing and really struggled, was about 115 grams of carbs a day.
115.
Yeah, and it's like your brain in a non-stressed state needs a minimum of 100 to 130 grams of carbohydrates, glycogen each day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Upwards of that, if you're in a highly stressed state, you can burn an additional like 1,000 calories. I think it's 1,100 if you're in a really highly stressed state.
Yeah.
And so then you put it down to also not eating that much, so your metabolism will keep you alive, start to fill things around, start to slow things down, shut some particular things off.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to eat for the butt that you want, not the butt that you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only soundbite we need.
That's it. We'll pull it up there, because I would like to keep going, but I got to run to a session in a few, like 25 minutes. That was good.
Oh, good. Thank you so much.
Thanks
so much for having me.
My pleasure. We got through like one or two of the questions, so
that's great.
You'll definitely have to come back for more. And we actually didn't even finish your top 10. We got all the we got a good top 10. They were all quad exercises for about 6 of them, and then we didn't finish the rest of
We don't need to finish them. Keep it at quad.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. That was fun.
That's okay. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Oh, my ears are really hot now.
Oh, no. Yeah, that was fun. I'll have to get you on the pod. I do want to. Who have I got? Have I got anyone else in? I don't think I have anyone else in. So I think I had a few people lined up, like the mushroom.